After yet another loss, it's clear the Knicks have a culture issue. I would argue they have some talent issues. The biggest problem is the lack of a clear-cut identity.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to the New York Knicks on a Friday morning. My name is Gavin Schall. I'm a New York City native and credentialed media member that's been covering this team for nearly a decade. And this is Locked On Knicks, your daily podcast on the Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team at least 5 days a week. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the number one sports podcast network in the entire world. The New York Knicks are not in a good place right now. They drop their seventh game in 9 tries, falling to the Golden State Warriors, 126-113. On today's show, we're going to talk about the new lows they hit defensively. We're going to talk about whether this is a culture issue, whether this is a talent issue, and why it is ultimately, I would say, the confluence of those two, an identity issue for the New York Knicks. How fixable that is, and some positives from this game. OG Anunoby was fantastic. In some ways, we saw Karl-Anthony Towns show off renewed effort. Mikal Bridges and Deuce McBride shot the ball pretty well. That is about as far as the positives go. But we have to start broadly here. The defensive issues pretty much this entire season have been very tricky for me to diagnose. I think a lot of people, somewhat lazily, I would argue, default to it's all on Cat or it's all on Brunson. And while I would say out of those two, the latter is the more true aspect of this, and the stats reflect that. Defensive EPM has Jalen Brunson as a bottom 5 defender in the NBA. We've seen teams relentlessly target him. His off-ball defense, for someone of his height and athletic limitations, he has to be locked in like almost no one else in the NBA off ball to be a productive defender. And he hasn't been anything close to that. He's been in La La Land, much like Josh Hart was last season off the ball. And that has really killed the Knicks. Mike Brown's scheme, this is something extra has pointed out to me, has really hurt the Knicks because they're constantly trying to overhelp, constantly trying to cover up for Jalen Brunson. And that just springs holes everywhere else versus just letting Brunson defend on an island, something that obviously he has physical limitations, but we saw in the Celtics series a year ago, he can do at a fairly decent level relative to his size and speed. You might be asking, well, why are you bringing up Jalen Brunson in a game where he didn't play? That is exactly my point, that this doesn't end with Jalen Brunson. After the Knicks get off to like an awesome start, frankly, to this game, both defensively and offensively, race out to an early 26-11 lead. Golden State punches back, 18-4 run, and the Warriors offense was just cooking from there. They again finished with 126 points in this one. They drop 69 between the second and third quarters. And this Knicks defense, Brunson, no Brunson, is just failing right now. In the 15 games since the NBA Cup, the Knicks now have the second worst defense in all of basketball. This was a unit at the time of the NBA Cup. They hit on cleaning the glass, which filters out garbage time, the 10th best defense in all of basketball. They are far below that now. I believe they're 17th right now. Again, only the Utah Jazz are worse over that time, and the Jazz are actively trying to lose games. They are starting Kevin Love, who is approaching his 40s. It's not going well for them. The Knicks have allowed 121 points per 100 possessions over that time. And they frankly, even though Mike Brown has a reputation as a defensive mastermind and obviously helped organize Golden State into some of the NBA's best defenses over the years, I don't think he's done a good job coaching this team on that end of the floor after a quite promising start to the year. And it is very hard to tell what is Mike Brown, what is the players not executing his vision and not giving effort. From what I've seen, some of the decisions he's made about how this team plays defense, I would personally disagree with. Bigger picture, over that 15-game stretch now since the NBA Cup. The Knicks' chief competition in the Eastern Conference, the Pistons and Celtics, are 1-2 in the NBA in net rating. Oklahoma City and San Antonio, teams we've said have had similar records since the Cup as the New York Knicks, are not playing nearly as poorly. Oklahoma City's 3rd in the NBA net rating over that stretch. The Spurs are 8th in net rating over that stretch. The Knicks are 24th now in the NBA, minus 4.6 net rating. They are still the 3rd seed in the East, but despite the fact that almost everyone else in the Eastern Conference is fledging and struggling and injured, they were just half a game ahead of the Raptors, just 2 games ahead of a Sixers team that is fresh off a season where they got the 3rd pick in the NBA draft. They're just 2 games ahead of the Orlando Magic, who essentially have not had their 3 best players together this entire season and have had their best player out for the last almost 20 games. And they are just 2 games, despite that cushion the Magic gave them. They're just 2 games ahead of the Magic. The Cleveland Cavaliers have been a disaster this year. They are just 2.5 games ahead of the Cavs. They are 2.5 games out of being the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. This has been a disaster stretch for the New York Knicks. And where it gets really tricky for me in diagnosing what is wrong defensively, it's not one guy, it's not one element of their defense. It is so many different micro breakdowns over the course of a game, over the course of the last 15 games. Last night against the Warriors, and really generally, like if I were to sum it up as a theme, the biggest thing I'm seeing is just a consistent lack of communication. I mentioned it after the Kings game as well, but almost more than any other team that I've watched, and I gave this caveat yesterday, I don't watch every team closely enough to say this definitively, but by instinct, by what I've noticed, like the Knicks are just uniquely poor at keeping 2 on the ball and not being able to understand or not even understand, just know what is their responsibility on a specific play. Are we switching? Are we showing? And that is all compounded by a team-wide lack of screen navigation, a team-wide lack of point of attack defense. And there's no the buck stops here spot with this defense right now. And some of that rests on like a guy I haven't really criticized a lot defensively, OG Anunoby, not really playing up to his typical standard on that end of the floor. Like you don't feel him the way you normally do by and large. He had a really good stretch on Kawhi in the second half of that Clippers game, but you don't notice him. He gets caught up on screens more than he normally does. He's conceding switches more than he normally does. I don't know if that is a will issue. I don't know. Based on his explosiveness offensively, I don't think it's an injury issue, but you're not seeing apex OG Anunoby right now. Deuce McBride is a guy XJ and I have said repeatedly was going to fix a lot of this for the Knicks if you just inserted him into the starting lineup. Last night was the perfect opportunity for him to prove us right? You're going against Steph Curry, arguably the player in the NBA where Deuce's best skill defensively, screen navigation, is most valuable against. You're not starting Jalen Brunson. You nominally have 4+ defenders and 4 really high levels on the 4 really high level defenders at their best on the floor between Deuce, Josh, who I would not normally describe that way, but the way he was playing before coming back from injury, I thought he was playing some of the best defense I've seen from him as a Knick. And then Mikal and OG, who are supposed to be elite defenders. And then Cat, who we keep saying, I gotta recheck the numbers. Maybe they've gone downhill, but defensive EPM for the majority of the season has painted Cat as an elite defender. I know none of you who watch this team consistently believe that. I think the number is exaggerating his impact on that end of the floor. I also think a lot, just because Cat's mistakes are so loud defensively, a lot of us disproportionately prescribe the Knicks issues to him when they're not all on him, and his elite rebounding is a real baseline setter, bellwether. I'm not sure if that's like what the right way to phrase it is, but like sets a high floor for the Knicks defense in some ways, despite his issues in other areas. I say all that to say, like, the Knicks had the personnel out there defensively to hold up against the Golden State Warriors, and they consistently lost. Yeah, at the screen. Deuce struggled all night to get around screens. Like, I'll go through some of the plays. Like, Steph beat him, and like, there's just no recognition that, okay, you're beat. OG takes Steph. has to be a peel switch there. Have to get out to Gui Santos, and he didn't. Santos hit a quarter three. And just consistently not getting around. Steph getting multiple buckets. Another one where he was slow around the screen. Cat has to switch onto Steph. Deuce lingers because he doesn't want to leave Cat on Steph. And Quentin Post rolls. No one's there. He hits a short push shot. Literally the next play, Steph screens for Jimmy. OG has to hang out because, again, it's Steph. Like, you can't leave a gap in your switch because the shot's going up and it's going in. And then Jimmy goes right through Deuce for a layup. Again, a couple plays after that, slow around the screen. OG's all the way down at the elbow, not wanting to give Jimmy a 4-on-3, but the highest priority there, even though Jimmy Butler's playing a great game, has to be to have a body at the level against Steph Curry, and he just walks into a 3. Sideline out of bounds. Deuce is top blocking Steph. Steph just says, all right, that's easy. I've done this a million times. Cuts back door. Shamet switches. It's too late. Steph to the rim, layup. Like all night, Deuce McBride, a guy like I've hung my hat on as someone who could help the Knicks defensively. And to be clear, I think he does, and I know he does. He did not have a good game in this one. But the issues were far from just isolated to Deuce McBride. We saw Josh Hart overhelping, spacing out, however you want to frame it defensively. We saw Cat have his share of problems. I mentioned like OG is just not like the baseline defender you need right now. Mikal was fine, but you don't really feel him. We'll go through those guys one-on-one, and then we'll go a little bigger picture on what's plaguing this team currently in just a sec right here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at Wayfair. But before we get into Wayfair, we got to talk about our good friends over at Ethos.
I carry a lot of responsibility in my household. If something happened to me, there would be serious consequences. We have a mortgage, we got tuition, we got everyday bills. Those aren't going anywhere if something happens to me. And I know that's an overwhelming feeling, but I'm taking steps to protect my family by getting life insurance through Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast, easy, and 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. And as of March 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 3,000 reviews. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LocdownNBA. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get your free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LocdownNBA. That's ethos.com/LocdownNBA. Ethos.com/LocdownNBA. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. I want to take a second to tell you about the Everydayer Club here at Locked On Knicks. We thank you for making this podcast and all of the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen every day and the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. Access to ad-free audio feed for Locked On Knicks, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. An invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show. You can check that out at lockedonnicks.supercast.com or the show notes to learn a little bit more. There are systemic issues for the New York Knicks defensively right now, and I'll continue to go through each guy, but we mentioned the lack of screen nav, the lack of point of attack. There is an overall lack of physicality that I think some of which is just the nature of the players. I see someone in the comments talking about Mikal Bridges physically, and there were just multiple times at the rim where he rotated to be the low man, and he just makes no difference. Like, you will at least see Josh and OG like go straight up, get a contest, and Mikal, it's as if he's not really there at times. And I wonder if that is like something with Mikal, it might be something inherent, but as a group, I wonder if that's something inherent or because they still don't know what Mike Brown wants out of them defensively, or it's not coached into them yet, or when one guy messes up, it makes the next guy hesitate. Like, again, it is really tricky to pinpoint because there was just such inconsistency, possession to possession, game to game. But it feels as if guys don't know what they're doing, where they're supposed to be. And this is I'll make a football analogy. Like in football, if you don't know the play, if you're not comfortable in the offense, like it is very, very hard to play physically if you are not playing decisively. And that is something I notice across the board for the New York Knicks. Josh Hart's errors like are some of the loudest on this team. Like I don't know what he's doing off the ball at times. Like there was a play where Cat was on an island against Jimmy Butler, and Hart again is trying to do the right thing, and he's under the rim, like preemptively trying to help. But Cat is a good switch defender, and like it's as if the team, because they're so frustrated with the mistakes he makes in pick and roll coverage at times and the stupid fouls that he commits, it's as if they don't think he actually is that good. And Cat slides with Jimmy perfectly, but Hart's preemptively out of position, and he leaves Kolek on the weak side guarding two guys. And Jimmy, it's an easy spray. DeAnthony Melton gets a corner three. Another one where like he's just providing, like it's one thing to be over aggressive in your help. You can mitigate that, the downside of that, if you're sudden and you're aggressive. But when Steph is bringing, or excuse me, when it wasn't Steph, it was someone else on the Warriors, bring the ball up, and Josh is preemptively off the ball, hovering around Steph, when Deuce is already on him, like that just makes things too easy for the Warriors. All Draymond has to do is set a pin down for Quentin Post, who Hart was supposed to be guarding. Cat like gets pinned on the screen and Post hits a three. And a lot of you guys at home, and this isn't derogative, like I'm taking like 4 hours to watch these games and watching these plays 5 times to figure out what's going on. But a lot of you at home are seeing that and saying, there we go with Cat again. Too lazy to get around the screen. It's like, no, that's Josh not guarding his man. And you're leaving Cat 2-on-1. And like, could Cat be better and more aggressive, like fighting around Draymond? Maybe. But that's not a fair position for him to be in. Like, that's a wide open three for Quentin Post because Josh Hart, again, is like just preemptively assuming something's going to happen. And I don't know if that's Hart making that decision, or is that Mike Brown telling him that that's what it's supposed to do? Where I think it might be Hart is like we saw this last year with Tom Thibodeau too. And maybe Brown and Tibbs have the same philosophy on that. But at a certain point, the Knicks defense worked against the Celtics last year, partially because Boston played into their hands when they did this, but because the Knicks were comfortable switching Brunson and switching Cat and leaving them on an island. And part of me wonders if this is Mike Brown in the regular season trying not to burn out Brunson and Cat and just have them isolated against play after play after play. And in the playoffs, you'll see a little bit more of like, all right, like we will try to provide some like aggressive gap help on drives, but we're not going to blitz the ball. We're not going to bail Brunson out of matchups by doing hedge and recover. Because the crap, like it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've seen enough of it at this point. And if I was to go really big picture and broader here, like I make the title of this episode, does this team have a culture issue? And at times I think they do, because you see stuff and Cat, like I'll talk about it next segment. The effort from him was certainly better than it was against the Kings. He was hyper aggressive on the offensive glass. He finishes this game with 20 rebounds, 8 offensive rebounds in just 31 minutes, right? That is dominance on the glass. That is activity. That is focus. That is commitment from Karl-Anthony Towns. There were even plays where he made extra efforts defensively, but you see stuff like the foul he had on Melton, where Cat, again, fantastic start to this one. He was playing such good basketball to open up this game, and he spoils it on one play, picking up his second foul really early because Melton picked his pocket, and Cat, not really trying to make a basketball play, just a frustration play, hooks his arm. And the best defensive Cat there is that he's trying to stop a fast break, but that would be a low basketball IQ moment for him because the most important thing is he doesn't get in foul trouble and he stays on the floor versus giving up one basket. To me, what this is an example of with Cat and why we all get so frustrated with him is it is him putting his emotion, and that emotion specifically is like embarrassment, maybe shame at having a bad play, being mad at himself for having a bad play, not taking responsibility for having a bad play and being mad at the world. He got his pocket picked. And in his mind, if he was quote unquote fouled, and sometimes he is legitimately fouled, but if he was quote unquote fouled, he has to show the world that he was wrong. And he's putting that over the good of the team, which is, hey, Melton Pete, pick your pocket. Maybe you won't get there, but run back on defense. Like, try to make a play, getting back on defense. And instead, he has to show he was wronged. He has to give like a blank, vacant stare at the ref. Like, what did I do? And to be clear, Cat is far from the only guy in the NBA guilty of that. That is like a league-wide issue. I bet all of us, when we play rec league basketball, do a version of that, right? Like a lot of grown men turn into babies when referees are involved. But that is just, it is more than demoralizing for a team. Like, it is, I'm trying to think of the right word. I mean, it's disintegrating. Like it erodes the core tenets of what this Knicks team was for years before they got Karl Anthony Towns. To be clear, for all the people saying like, yeah, it was so much better back then, I don't even know if that's on Cat, because Julius Randle was doing all the same crap that Cat is currently doing. But it is an issue, and they don't have the same cultural bellwethers of an Isaiah Hartenstein, of a Dante DiVincenzo to mitigate that. And like, yes, Josh can push back against some of that. Brunson at his best, at his most engaged, can push back against some of that. Deuce and Shamet coming back in this game can push back against some of that. But it doesn't feel like this team, either basketball wise or toughness wise or culturally, like, has a solid base right now. And it makes it seem like they just caught lightning in a bottle last year in the playoffs, and things clicked, and Detroit had their injuries, and Boston played into their hands. And that is not to dismiss what the Knicks did against the Celtics, because the Knicks showed real backbone and real fight. And I go back to that game 6 and the second, third, and fourth efforts that, like, Mitchell Robinson, I should have said before, is a key part of that culture that he made on that possession where he shut down Jaylen Brown in the corner, right? Like, the Knicks still have a lot of the pieces. Part of it is what they added this offseason in Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele was a talent upgrade over Campaign and Precious Achiuwa, both of whom, like, are not guys, like, I would still say this, are not guys who should play minutes on a team with championship aspirations, but at least those guys played their butts off. And Clarkson less so than, like, Clarkson in fits and spurts this year has played really hard defensively and has made extra effort plays. Yabu played 4 minutes in this game, and Mike Brown rightfully benched him the rest of this game. And I continue to be just mystified that Mike Brown does not trust Kevin McCullough Jr., because he's a guy who has flaws, but he can shoot, he's smart, and he brings all that stuff to the table in terms of extra effort. And that is like that. This is a question point with if Mike Brown is the right coach for this team, that he doesn't see that the Knicks just need an injection of a guy who's going to compete his butt off, because they are losing that rapidly. And that is not a Mike Brown versus Tom Thibodeau thing, because they didn't have that compete all regular season last year. And I know a lot of you listening have short memories, but we were having these exact same conversations a year ago about this team when they were losing by 40 to the Thunder, 40 to the Celtics, 40 to the Cavs, and looking like they didn't want to play basketball anymore. It was even worse last season. So I don't think this is a Tibbs thing and that you lost Tibbs' toughness. Like, not that wasn't real, but there is something to the core of this team, and again, what they lost in Hartenstein and DiVincenzo, that at least in the regular season, or this team thinks they earned something that they haven't actually earned yet in terms of just being able to sleepwalk through the regular season. It is not good right now. And none of that means that it won't turn around. Like, I do think that part of it is, right or wrong, this team is taking the regular season lighter than they did last season. There still has to be a middle ground where there is like a baseline culture and fight there, because these aren't, I'm trying to think of the right example. Like, even the 22 Warriors to some extent would be an example. Like, this isn't a team full of guys in their mid-30s making their last run. These are all guys smack dab in the middle of their prime. I heard Jonathan Macri say it. I agree with him. Like, at this point, it's too late. You can't use the cup as an excuse anymore, right? We are past that. It's been too many games. They're not putting enough in right now. We'll come back. We'll talk about some of the good things in this game next on Locked On Knicks. All right, now I want to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It is the one-stop shop for getting your home back on track, from bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room. Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair is everything you need for a full home refresh, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. I love that I can find pieces that match my style without spending a fortune. Shopping is easy, delivery smooth, and everything arrives exactly as expected. It honestly makes getting back into a routine this new year feel a lot more manageable. So get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. Let's try to finish up on some positives. Maybe I'll get to some more negatives. I'm going to try to go like about a minute on all the key rotation guys. OG Anunoby, this was his best driving game of the year, and he did a great job building off of that Kings game. He shoots 9 for 16 from 2 in this game, and playing with Josh, it wasn't like 5 out ball, wide open lanes. It was OG driving and attacking in traffic, and he was awesome at it. I mean, from like the first big play of the game, that pump and go by Jimmy Butler, strolls in, monster two-handed jam, gets Horford on a switch after that, backs it up between the legs. Hezzy beats him for a lefty layup. Benefits from the Knicks ball movement. They had one seat, and they more of this happens when Landry Shamet is out there. Shamet drives, drops it off to Yabu. Yabu can't get a shot off, sprays to Mikal, swing to Deuce to OG. Steph trying to close out, pump and go by him for a layup. Mikal sets a screen for him to get Moody instead of Butler. Hezzy burst, bump, discard. Moody elevate to discard Moody, elevates up and over Draymond for the put in. Some big shots late in the shot clock at that 3 that was ultimately wiped off the board. Next play, shot clock winding down, sneaks into the lane by sprinting into the catch. Old man Ginobili technique, finishes for an and one. Gets a rebound in the early fourth quarter, goes coast to coast for a jam. Great impromptu transition screen from Deuce McBride about 35 out to give OG the runway. Battering ram, another one where he goes through Richard, I'm not sure, for a coast-to-coast layup. A last one, offensive board, spin around Horford, lefty lay. Like, just, I would love to see the same defensively from him, but just like a great driving game like we saw last year when Brunson was out. OG, he works on this stuff. He puts the time in, and it just, like, he can give you some one-on-one offense that just cannot disappear when Jalen Brunson's back. And I said the same things last year with Tibbs. I don't know if that is a coaching thing. I don't know if that is an OG thing, but he has to keep that same energy when Jalen Brunson is off there. I mentioned Cat, just dominant start on the offensive glass. Draymond stood him up a couple times. The ISO game was not working for him. So it took offensive rebounding. It took a really great play call by Mike Brown after Steve Kerr took an early timeout, and Kerr ran this great play to get Moses Moody a corner 3, and Mike Brown went right back at his mentor. Nice, just like playing off of tendency. They set a double drag up top for Mikal, and instead of holding that double drag, so that's kind of similar to Horns. People tell me I'm wrong about that, but both bigs are up top at each wing, setting 2 screens. And instead of holding that, Hart runs across, sets a cross screen for Cat. Cat pops off it, gets post on an island, pump, jab, 3 in his eye, looking like Carmelo Anthony there. Couple of pick and pops. He gets 3s, 5 offensive boards in the first 11 minutes. Whatever you want to say about Cat, 17 points, 20 rebounds in 31 minutes. He was +4. The issue is that he played 31 minutes, and that's because he had 5 fouls, at least in part, because he had 5 fouls. That killed the Knicks. Like, it was not that Cat was bad when he was on the floor. It was not that the Knicks were bad when Cat was in the game. It was that he got into foul trouble and he couldn't play. And that's on him. Mikal, great shot-making game. 9 for 11 from the field, 21 points, 3 for 4 from 3 assists. Again, you looked at some of the physicality stuff, 0 free throws, 1 rebound, no steals, no blocks. I don't think you can sit here and tell me with a straight face that Mikal Bridges played a great game because he's not bringing that tertiary stuff. You have a night where he shoots the lights out and frankly is like extraordinary with some of the mid-range shots he makes and some of his footwork. And you sit there after the game and being like, I didn't really feel Mikal Bridges. I didn't really notice Mikal Bridges making a game-changing impact in this one. At least that's my opinion on it. Maybe I'm a hater for Mikal Bridges. I don't know, but I don't think this is like a great, impactful night of basketball from Mikal Bridges, despite the fact that he shot great. Josh Hart was fantastic. He was special in the first 6 or 7 minutes of this one, single-handedly setting the pace for the Knicks, like trailing an OG transition opportunity. OG missed. Josh didn't assume anything, bats the ball out, hits Mikal for a trail 3, confident, shooting a corner 3 in the early going, getting multiple transition layups, hitting Mikal for multiple transition layups after Cat got an outlet, taking off running, like finding easy buckets for this team after the Warriors tightened up their half-court defense. And then he kills you in the second half because he doesn't want to shoot. And the Warriors know that, and they play off him. And Josh can mitigate that when he has the ball if he's aggressive driving. And he's aggressive getting to the rim because even though with Josh, you're not 5 out, if Josh has the ball, you are functionally 5 out because you have to guard him to some extent. And you're guarding the 4 other shooters. So he's a wide open lane. And he has to take advantage of that by being a playmaker. And he didn't do that. He didn't want to shoot the threes the Warriors were giving him in the second half. And I've said it a million times, like Chris was on here and he was talking about all the great stuff that Josh brings. And that's all true. If the other team is not guarding him and he is not aggressively playing to score off of that, he is a massive negative for this team. And you want to talk about how this offense is bogged down at times. It is not hitting the highs it did earlier in the year. Some of that can fall to Josh. And yes, he's doing other good stuff to mitigate that, but I don't know. I don't know where it falls. Deuce, I mentioned the defense was terrible. The shot making from him was really good. 9 for 16 from the field, 6 of 12 from 3, 25 points, even bigger than that. 6 assists in this game. Like just with sheer pace gives you a decent impersonation of some of what Brunson gives you. I know there's a lot of qualifiers to that, but crazy shot making, shot clock expiring in the first quarter, hit a banked in left wing 3, second time in a month. Ian Eagle, I think, on the call for both of them, where he made just an impossible bank off a weird angle. Like it is that Steph quality of just being like almost a magical shot maker that Deuce has right now. The transition push he had against 2 all-world defenders at their peak in Gary Payton II and Draymond Green, lefty, high off the backboard finish, and one overall. Them one like top 5 finish of Deuce McBride's career from what I've seen. I mentioned the screen that he set some big threes late, 29-footer off a DHO, drained another one. But Deuce was part of, like, again, the team-wide effort issue. Like, he hit that 3, cut it to single digits with 2.5 minutes to go, and he jogs back on defense and pods, gets a transition layup. And that is something you don't usually see from Deuce. And this is an interesting thing. And something people have talked about when they push back on Deuce being a starter. Do you get the same level of manic effort fighting through screens and fighting through traffic and hustling back on defense and closing out across the court if he's playing 35 minutes and has the ball in his hands a lot? And maybe fairly, like we didn't in this game. Like it was not the second, third, fourth effort Deuce that we typically see. And we probably have to acknowledge that if he's playing 35 minutes, while I would still argue he's good, he's more than good enough to deserve that, you are going to lose like some of the peak, like the reason his impact metrics, I forgot the guy's name, but guest writer at Knicks Film School newsletter had an exceptional, Jeremiah Engelman, I don't know, had an exceptional article about Deuce McBride. Like they were all in one metrics. I think it was RAPM, I want to say, that have Deuce as a top 10 player in the NBA. Like you are losing that level of minute by minute impact from him when you're playing him 35 minutes. Shamet, really good return. Maybe because he does only play 16 minutes in this one, but his screen navigation was awesome, like much better than Deuce's. Cutting off Steph, one play where he totally shut down Steph's dribble, still got beat on a give and go. Couple of transition threes, huge, just 2 for 7. Like his energy, the bounce that he has, he seems like he's in great shape. That was all good. Gershon, worst 4 minutes I've seen from Nick in my time doing this are pretty darn close to it. I'm blocking out some Emmanuel Mudiay PTSD in there. The backup bigs were not good. Ariel Hukporti, one nice chase down block. He, in 10 minutes, does not make much of an impact. Just 1 point, 3 rebounds. He's better than Yabu. We gotta give him that. Mike Brown was so desperate that he went super duper small for a long stretch. Jordan Clarkson, bits and pieces of good offense, bits and pieces of good defense, hurt by a lot of missed shots and stretches where he's getting cooked defensively. All right, that is all I had for this one. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. We'll be back Saturday night where XJ will have you covered for a recap of Knicks Suns. Hopefully a more optimistic episode. I'll say this. I don't think the season is over. I do think this is a terrible stretch. And I do think the Knicks are going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat at the trade deadline. But until then, I'm Gavin, and we'll talk to you soon right here on Locked On Knicks.